Have you ever asked yourself, why did they hurt me like that? Why did the people I trusted most become the very ones who broke me? This video is not for everyone. It's for the silent ones. The ones who've been walking around, smiling on the outside, while bleeding inside. The ones who were betrayed, not by strangers, but by voices they loved, by arms they trusted, by people they would have defended with their life. And if you're still here, it's because your soul knows this isn't just another video. This is a spiritual appointment. They didn't just break your heart. They triggered your awakening. What you went through wasn't weakness. It was a sacred setup. Heaven knew what was coming, so it marked you in advance. And that mark is why you felt different your entire life. You were chosen, and that means your pain had purpose. It was never random. It was never meaningless. What shattered you was a signal, a spiritual one. And today, that pain, that wound, that moment you thought would destroy you, is about to become your access point to power. So stay. Don't skip. Don't blink. Because what's coming in the next few minutes might be the exact confirmation your spirit has been crying out for. Now, before we go deeper, if your soul already feels something awakening, tap the like button as a spiritual agreement. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because this isn't the last message heaven has for you. And drop 99 in the comments, not just as a number, but as a prophetic code that means, I'm not lost. He left the 99 because I'm the one. Let's begin. Let me say something that might shake you. That betrayal wasn't personal. It felt personal. It looked like it came from a person. But what was actually moving behind the curtain was spiritual. You didn't just get caught in someone's bad decision. You were targeted, marked, and not because you were weak, but because something holy was waking up inside of you. And darkness always panics when light starts rising. Some of the people who hurt you the most, they didn't even understand why they turned on you. But the spirit realm did. The enemy did. Because what you carry threatens what they've built. You were not just betrayed by people. You were betrayed through people. That moment of heartbreak, that phone call, that lie, that silence, that abandonment. It wasn't random. It was a precise strike designed to crush your identity before you could realize who you were becoming. Because here's the raw truth. Hell never wastes resources on someone without a future. If you were empty, if you were average, if you had no spiritual weight, you wouldn't have been attacked so violently. But you were. And you were attacked early, before your voice could grow, before your influence could expand, before your mantle could manifest. The enemy knew something about you, something you hadn't even realized about yourself yet. You are a threat. And betrayal? It was the enemy's attempt to disconnect you from your own identity. But what the enemy didn't account for was your resilience, your anointing, your capacity to turn trauma into transformation. You see, when betrayal hits a normal person, it leaves them broken. But when betrayal hits a chosen one, it triggers something ancient inside. A code, a calling, a knowing. You begin to see through illusions. You begin to hear God more clearly. You stop relying on validation. You start walking in conviction. The very moment that was meant to silence you becomes the moment your true voice is born. And don't get it twisted. God allowed it, not because He wanted you to suffer, but because He needed to reveal the difference between covenant and convenience. Some people were never for your calling. They liked your normal, but they feared your next level. They were okay with you struggling, but they couldn't handle you glowing. So God used betrayal as a divine scalpel to cut away what couldn't go with you. Because your next chapter requires purity, alignment, and vision. And He loves you too much to let you drag dead weight into a divine season. You thought you were being punished, but in reality, you were being positioned. Let me go deeper. Betrayal reveals what words can't. It reveals loyalty. It exposes motives. It shows you what prayers were real and which smiles were masks. God wasn't trying to break your heart. He was trying to break the illusion. Because once the illusion dies, truth can finally breathe. And here's the part no one tells you. Pain is one of heaven's most precise teachers. When your heart is shattered, your spirit becomes sharp. You start to notice patterns. You detect lies in tones, not just in words. You develop the kind of discernment that can't be taught in books. It's forged in betrayal, born in fire, tested in silence. And right now, I need you to understand. What happened to you was the beginning of something the enemy will regret forever. Because you didn't break like they expected. You awakened. You rose. You shifted. And now, you carry a clarity that cost you everything. That's why you walk differently. That's why you don't entertain small talk anymore. That's why your spirit feels allergic to anything fake. You were betrayed to be refined. You were rejected to be redirected. You were abandoned to be anointed. You are not who you were before the pain. And that's exactly the point. But don't exhale yet, because what's coming next will show you why the betrayal was never meant to end you, but to expose you. The next truth will shake you deeper, because your pain didn't just expose others. It exposed your power. Ready? Stay with me. We're just getting started. You need to understand something that goes beyond logic, something that bypasses what your eyes saw, and dives deep into what your spirit knows. You weren't just someone trying to find your way in life. You were someone already chosen, already seen, already marked, long before you ever realized it. And the moment heaven marked you, hell took notice. You were born with something inside you that this world couldn't categorize, a frequency that didn't match the noise, a purity that couldn't be corrupted, a strength that didn't come from muscles, but from eternity. From a young age, you noticed things others missed. You felt pain deeper. You questioned more. You saw truth buried under people's masks. And you didn't know why, but you knew you were different. That difference? It was the mark. Not on your skin, on your soul. And that mark doesn't just attract blessings, it also attracts battles. Because when God places something rare inside you, the war begins early. And it's not just external, it's surgical, targeted, precise. The enemy couldn't stop your calling, so he tried to break your confidence. He couldn't touch your destiny, so he tried to manipulate your direction. He couldn't erase the anointing, so he sent people to attack your identity. The betrayal you suffered wasn't about those people. They were just instruments. What was really happening was a spiritual chess match, and the target was your soul. Because if the enemy could convince you that you were unwanted, you'd never believe you were called. If he could make you doubt your worth, you'd never activate your voice. If he could surround you with rejection, he could bury your revelation. But here's what he didn't expect. That in your breaking, you would find clarity. That in your isolation, you would hear God louder. That through your pain, you'd become more dangerous than ever before. You see, the attacks on your heart were never about punishment. They were about prevention. The enemy knew, if you ever discovered who you really are, the game would be over. So he tried to break you before you bloomed. He sent counterfeit friendships. He orchestrated betrayals. He infected the mouths of people you loved so their words would become weapons against your self-esteem. But all of it backfired, because God doesn't waste pain, he recycles it. He uses it as fertilizer for your next season. And that heartbreak, that trauma, that betrayal that left you gasping for air, it was actually the beginning of your activation. What felt like rejection was redirection. God wasn't closing doors to punish you. He was shielding you from spiritual contamination. Some people couldn't go with you not because they were bad, but because your mantle was too heavy for them to carry beside you. Your purity made them uncomfortable. Your vision made them insecure. Your destiny required surgical separation, and yes, it hurt. Yes, it made you question everything. But that pain wasn't the end of you. It was the revelation of you. You didn't just lose people, you lost illusions. You lost the need to be accepted. You lost the fear of being misunderstood. You lost the version of yourself that depended on others to feel valid. And in that loss, you gained something priceless: spiritual authority. Because only those who survive deep betrayal can carry deep truth. You are not the same person you were before the storm. You walk with fire now. You see with eyes that know. You carry wisdom that was birthed in warfare. And whether you realize it or not, you've stepped into a realm where your very presence disrupts darkness. That's why you've been feeling different. That's why certain people have started to fall away without explanation. That's why your spirit has been restless, because heaven is rearranging your surroundings to fit the weight of your calling. So let this be clear. You weren't betrayed because you were disposable. You were betrayed because you were dangerous, not to people, to systems, to lies, to chains, to everything that pretended to have power over you. And now, you're waking up, you're remembering, you're stepping into the awareness that you were never ordinary. You were divinely assigned. Heaven didn't just give you a gift, it gave you a mission. And now, nothing in hell can stop what's already been marked by God. But listen closely. We're not done. Because the pain didn't just reveal your spiritual status. It trained you. It built something in you that no degree, no platform, no title ever could. And in the next part, you'll understand how that training shaped a voice the world needs to hear. So don't move. We're still going deeper. Let's stop pretending it was just life. Let's stop watering it down and calling it a phase or a tough season. No, what you went through was prophetic preparation, strategic, divine, brutal, holy. Look back, not just at what hurt you, but how it hurt you. Look deeper into the timing, into the people, into what you were about to step into, and what suddenly tried to crush you right before it. It wasn't coincidence. It was calculated spiritual pressure, designed by heaven to activate the very authority you're now carrying. Every heartbreak, every moment you were abandoned, gaslit, used, forgotten. They weren't just emotional moments. They were spiritual transactions. Because in the realm of the chosen, pain is currency. The deeper the pain, the higher the purpose, the more brutal the betrayal, the greater the breakthrough being birthed through it. And God, in His sovereignty, doesn't waste pain. He doesn't always stop it either, because sometimes He allows what hurts to shape what heals. You didn't just survive what they did, you resurrected from it. And you didn't come back the same, you came back unshakable. Not cold, just clear, not hard, just refined. Because pain, when processed in the presence of God, becomes fire that forges unbreakable weapons. You are now one of them. When people hear you speak now, they don't just hear words. They feel weight. They feel what you've walked through. They feel the oil that only pain can press out of a soul. That's why you feel different. That's why you don't fit in rooms that used to make you feel safe. That's why silence now feels sacred to you. Because you've been in the kind of pain that makes noise sound cheap. Pain was never your prison. It was your prophetic classroom. And what did it teach you? It taught you to see through people, not just look at them. It taught you to sense motives in silence, to feel shifts in atmosphere, to detect fake support before it can even manifest. It made you a spiritual architect, able to build from ruins, able to lead from loss, able to carry a voice that doesn't just speak, but shakes spirits awake. And now, you walk with something rare. You don't beg for attention, because you've already met God in the dark. You don't chase validation, because you've already been affirmed in isolation. You don't need applause, because the anointing you carry makes even demons tremble. That's what the pain unlocked. You weren't being broken. You were being trained, It wasn't punishment, it was positioning. And what positioned you is now preparing to elevate you. But let's go deeper. You've probably noticed this. People are drawn to you now, but they can't explain why. They say things like, "There's something about you. I feel peace around you. I feel seen when I'm with you." Do you know what that is? That's not just personality. That's spiritual residue. They're sensing the presence you carry because of where you've been, because of what you've survived, because of the fire that didn't burn you. It refined you. You now carry a voice that can only be earned through fire. A voice that doesn't just speak truth. It pierces through lies. A voice that doesn't entertain. It awakens. A voice that doesn't perform. It delivers. That's why you've been feeling called to more. That's why comfort doesn't satisfy you anymore. That's why you're restless in routines that once felt safe. Because you weren't meant to stay hidden. You were meant to release what the pain taught you. But this is where the enemy will try again. He'll try to tell you, you're not ready. You're too broken. No one will listen. Stay quiet. But listen carefully. Your pain prepared you to speak in ways that textbooks never could. You are a prophetic voice, forged in silence. You are a living testimony that God trains leaders in caves, not conferences. You didn't go through all that just to return to normal. You didn't lose sleep, bleed in secret, scream into pillows and wake up anyway, just to fade back into the crowd. No. You went through all that, so that when the time came, you could speak, and chains would break. And that time is drawing near. But don't move yet, because what comes next will explain why your isolation was never abandonment, but activation. We're not done. The next part is where everything starts to make divine sense. There's a sacred truth most people never tell you about being chosen. Before the calling comes the isolation. And it doesn't feel divine. It feels like abandonment. It feels like silence. It feels like being invisible in the very moments you needed to be seen the most. But hear this clearly. You weren't being abandoned. You were being set apart. God didn't leave you. He hid you. He didn't ignore you. He was incubating you. Because what he placed inside of you was too sacred to be exposed too soon. Too pure to be polluted by the wrong people. You thought the silence was punishment, but it was a cocoon, a divine concealment, a womb for your future voice. And while the world saw nothing happening, heaven was forming a weapon. Let's go deeper. When God marks you for something uncommon, he often walks you into a season of holy separation. People you once loved will fall away without reason. Opportunities you thought were meant for you will suddenly collapse. Doors will shut so violently it'll feel like rejection. But what if I told you? God was never rejecting you. He was redirecting you. He was isolating your frequency, fine-tuning your spirit, detoxing your soul from voices that couldn't go where he's sending you. Because your calling? It's too weighty, too costly, too clean for compromised circles, and so he isolates you. Not to break you, but to build you without distraction. He couldn't elevate you in front of those who secretly envied you. He couldn't anoint you in environments that glorified noise over substance. He couldn't speak secrets into your spirit while you were still surrounded by opinions. So he removed you. And at first, it hurt. You stared at silent phones. You walked through rooms that used to feel like home and suddenly felt like prisons. You questioned your worth, your purpose, your very presence on earth. But in the silence, you began to hear something deeper. A voice that didn't speak in words, but in presence. God began to train you, not with crowds, but with stillness. Not with applause, but with whispers. Not with mentors, but with mystery. And in that holy obscurity, you began to transform. Your thoughts sharpened, your emotions matured. Your discernment evolved. You no longer craved what was shallow. You started searching for what was sacred. And that was the signal. The sign that the cocoon phase was working. Because you were no longer who you were before the silence. You were being activated. Let me say this with fire. Not everyone who started with you was meant to finish with you. Some people were assignments, temporary alignments for a short season. But your destiny requires people with purified hearts. People who don't just admire your anointing, but protect it. So God had to show you, not with explanations, but with absence. Absence has a way of revealing what words never could. And you started seeing it. You saw how some friends only loved you when you were useful. How some supporters only clapped when you were quiet. How some leaders were only leading you to limits, not liberty. And once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. That was the turning point. Isolation was no longer your prison. It became your platform for revelation. You were no longer crying for company. You were preparing for command. Because the next season of your life won't require crowds. It will require clarity. And now that your clarity is maturing, so is your calling. You're about to walk into spaces that used to intimidate you. But now, they'll recognize the authority you carry. Not because of a title, not because of a platform, but because you were trained by the one who speaks in silence. You now carry a stillness that silences storms, a discernment that sees beyond words, a presence that shifts rooms without needing attention. And it all came from isolation. This is why chosen ones must be set apart before they are released. Because if you rise too soon, surrounded by the wrong voices, you'll compromise to keep their comfort. But when you rise after isolation, you don't rise to please. You rise to lead. And you are rising now. But don't move just yet, because the next part is where it all clicks. Why the betrayal? Why the pain? Why the silence? All of it has been building toward one truth. You're not just healing, you're becoming a voice. And what's coming next will reveal exactly why your scars are the keys to someone else's freedom. Stay with me. The final pieces are about to be unlocked. Let this settle in your spirit. You didn't go through everything you went through just to say you survived. You didn't crawl through fire, cry yourself to sleep, and rebuild your soul from shattered pieces, just to walk through life quietly. You were never meant to blend in. You were always meant to stand out, to disrupt, to challenge, to awaken. Because what you carry now isn't just a memory. It's a message. It's a voice. And that voice was birthed in your pain, nurtured in your silence, and refined in your isolation. You're not here to replay your trauma. You're here to transform others with your testimony. There's someone right now praying for the clarity you carry. Someone who's still in the fire you already walked through. Someone who's believing the same lies that once tried to choke your destiny. And they won't be freed by theory. They won't be healed by pretty words. They need your scars. Because every scar you carry is now a weapon of healing. Every broken season that tried to silence you has become a frequency in your voice that resonates with others still trapped. You speak, and something inside them starts to stir. You share your truth, and chains begin to crack in unseen places. That's not coincidence. That's anointing. That's what happens when someone doesn't just survive. They allow God to repurpose their survival into spiritual authority. And let me be very clear. You are not a victim of your story. You are a vessel of redemption. What hurt you has now been harnessed. What crushed you has now become compassion. What tried to bury you has now become your platform. You're not just rising. You are resurrecting others with every word you speak. And that is what hell fears the most. Because hell can handle passive believers. It can tolerate silent survivors. But what it cannot handle is a healed warrior who speaks. And that's exactly what you're becoming. When you walk into rooms now, you don't just walk in with information, you carry impartation. You carry the kind of presence that disrupts fake peace, that shakes hidden darkness, that wakes up people who didn't even realize they were asleep. Because your voice doesn't come from ego. It comes from encounters, from the trenches, from the late nights when you were curled up, questioning everything, but still whispered, "God, I trust you." That voice? It has been authorized by fire, by betrayal, by heaven. You're not just here to inspire, you're here to ignite. And that's why everything had to happen the way it did. That's why certain people walked away. That's why certain doors slammed shut. That's why the attacks came so early and so violently. Because the enemy wasn't afraid of your past. He was terrified of your voice. He knew that once you discovered who you really were, you'd stop hiding. You'd stop shrinking. You'd stop second-guessing the mantle that's been heavy on your shoulders since childhood. And now here you are, wiser, sharper, different. You no longer seek crowds. You seek impact. You no longer need titles. You walk in truth. You no longer live for applause. You move at the sound of God's whisper. And let me tell you something sacred. You are walking into a season where your voice will go places your feet haven't yet touched. Your words will enter rooms your name was never invited into. Your testimony will break chains in people you've never met, because your voice has been baptized in fire. And heaven trusts it now. This is not the time to hold back. This is not the time to wonder if you're enough. You are not just enough. You are appointed. You carry a language the broken will understand. You carry a sound that darkness cannot counterfeit. And that sound, your sound, gets activated today. So take this moment seriously. Because from this point forward, you're no longer surviving your story. You're commanding your atmosphere. You're shifting spiritual climates. You're unlocking others with the same voice you once struggled to find. But don't log off just yet. Because everything has led to this next and final moment. The part that will bring it all together. The revelation that will leave you forever changed. What comes next will be the activation point for your next level. Don't blink. Don't breathe. We're going all the way in. Listen to me. The betrayal didn't break you. It revealed you. It shattered the shell the world put on you, so the divine version of you could finally breathe. Every tear you cried in silence was a seed. Every night you thought you wouldn't make it was a baptism. And every time you were overlooked, heaven was carving your name into destiny. You weren't being rejected. You were being refined. You weren't being silenced. You were being saturated with wisdom, fire, and unstoppable resilience. You were forged in silence, raised in shadows, cut in secret. But now, you rise in the light with fire in your eyes. This world doesn't need more noise. It needs your voice. It needs the sound of someone who bled and still stood up, who lost everything and still chose God, who was betrayed and still became a blessing. You are not a victim. You are a prophetic weapon, an arrow from the mouth of God, a breaker of chains, a caller of exiles, a revealer of truth. And now, you walk with power that hell recognizes and heaven responds to. The pain that almost killed you will now become the blueprint of deliverance for multitudes. You didn't just survive. You were anointed in the ashes. And now, you don't wait for permission. You release declarations. You shift atmospheres. You walk with fire in places that were once drenched in fear. This is your moment. Don't just feel it. Own it. Don't just agree. Declare it. Comment below. I am chosen and I'm awakening. Let heaven echo with your boldness. Let hell tremble at your resurrection. Let your soul record this moment forever. Because this is not the end. It's the ignition of your divine rise. You've cried. Now you rise. You've been broken. Now you build. You've been betrayed. Now you're born. Welcome to your activation. Welcome to your calling. Welcome to the reason you survived. Now go and shake the earth.